Hello there. I stumbled upon a wonderfully descriptive piece by Gurdjieff today on journalists, and I guess we can extend that to social media and the internet. So I'm going to read it out. I myself knew a music critic who had never once in his life touched a musical instrument, and therefore had no practical understanding of music. He did not even know what sound was in general, or the difference between the notes do and re, but owing to the established abnormalities of contemporary civilization, he somehow occupied the responsible post of music critic, and thus became an authority for all the readers of a well-established and widely circulated newspaper. And it was, of course, according to his quite illiterate indications, that unshakable opinions were formed in all his readers on the question of music, that question which should in reality be like a beacon of light for the correct understanding of one of the aspects of truth. The public never knows who is writing, it knows only the newspaper itself, which belongs to a group of experienced businessmen. What the person writing in these papers really knows, or what is going on behind the scenes in the newspaper office, the reader never knows, but takes everything written in the papers at its face value. The leaders of contemporary civilization themselves, standing on a very low level of moral and psychic development, are incapable, like children playing with fire, of knowing the force and significance of the effect of such literature on the mass of people. According to my impression obtained from the study of ancient history, the leaders of former civilizations would never have allowed such an abnormality to continue for so long. This opinion of mine may be confirmed by authentic information which has come down to us about the serious attitude towards daily literature taken by the rulers of our country not so long ago, in the period when it was considered one of the greatest nations, namely when Great Babylon belonged to us and was the sole centre of culture recognized by everyone on earth. According to this information, a daily press also existed there, in the form of what are called printed papyri, although of course in an incomparably smaller quantity than now. But at that time, those who participated in such literary organs were only elderly and qualified persons, known to all for their serious merits and honourable lives, and there was even an established rule for appointing such men to these positions under oath, and they were therefore called sworn collaborators, just as now there are sworn juries, sworn experts, and so on. But nowadays, any whippersnapper can be a journalist, so long as he knows how to express himself prettily and, as is said, literarily. I became particularly well acquainted with the psyche and could in general evaluate the being of these products of contemporary civilization who fill the newspapers and periodicals. Once, when I had gone to Baku with the intention of staying all winter with my nephew, several young persons came to him and asked his permission for their new society of literati and journalists to hold meetings in one of the large rooms on the ground floor of his house, in which he had originally intended to establish a restaurant. Outsiders were admitted to these meetings, and I often went to listen to their discussions. Most of them were still quite young, weak and effeminate, and the faces of some showed clearly that their parents must have been drunkards or had suffered from other passions through willlessness, or that the possessors themselves of these faces had various bad habits concealed from others. I often happened to come in contact with the representatives of this modern literature, and they all made the same impression on me, resembling one another like peas in a pod. Many of them, for some reason or other, are called poets. At the present time, anywhere in Europe, anyone who writes even a short piece of nonsense of the order of green roses, purple mimosas, divine are her poses, like hanging memories, and so on, is awarded the appellation of poet by those around him, and some of them even engrave this title on their visiting cards. Among these contemporary journalists and writers, esprit de corps is somehow highly developed, and they strongly support and immoderately extol one another on all occasions. It seems to me that this feature of theirs is the chief cause of their spreading sphere of influence and of their false authority over the masses, and also of the unconscious and servile adulation with which the crowd bows down before these nullities, as with a clear conscience one can call them. At the meetings in Baku which I have mentioned, one of them would go onto the platform and begin to read something of the order of the verses I have just quoted, and finish his speech by making an announcement more or less as follows. I now yield the platform to an incomparable luminary of the learning of our time, Mr. So-and-so, who by chance has come to our city on particularly important business and has been so kind as to not refuse to come to our meeting today. We will now have the privilege of listening to his enchanting voice with our own ears. And when this celebrity would appear on the platform, he would begin his speech with these words, My dear ladies and gentlemen, my colleague has been so modest as to call me a celebrity. As a matter of fact, in comparison with him, I am not worthy even to sit in his presence. The celebrity is not I, but he. He is known not only everywhere in our great Russia, but throughout the whole civilized world. And only after such a preamble would this new celebrity pronounce several absurdities, as for example on the theme, why the Sirikitsi made war on the Parnakalpi. After these learned sessions, suppers were always served, with 2 bottles of cheap wine, and many hid their pockets some bit of hors d'oeuvre, either a piece of sausage or a herring with a piece of bread, and if by chance anyone else noted this, they would usually say, Oh, this is for my dog, the rascal already has the habit. Always expect something when I return home late. On the day after the suppers, an account of the meetings always appeared in all the local papers, written in an incredibly pompous style, and the speeches were more or less accurately quoted. But of course, no mention was made of the modesty of the supper, or of the making off with a piece of sausage for the dog. Such are the people who write in the papers about all sorts of truths and scientific discoveries, and the naive reader who does not see them or know their lives draws his conclusion about events and ideas from the empty words of these writers, who are neither more nor less ill, inexperienced and illiterate as far as human life is concerned. In all the cities of Europe, with very few exceptions, the writers of books or newspaper articles are just such immature scatterbrains who have been what they are owing chiefly to their heredity and their specific weaknesses. From my point of view, there can be no doubt whatsoever that of all the causes of the many abnormalities of contemporary civilization, the principal and most obvious one is this same journalistic literature, owing to its demoralizing and pernicious effect on the psyche of people. Well, that was Gurdjieff in 1950. What would he say today, with the countless swarm of fools on the internet and social media, all buzzing around with 5-second ideas? And what would he say of the politicians who all walk onto the podium checking their phone for the last instructions from the degenerates in the media? What would he say? In the last 20 years since the internet has exploded into life, the entire culture of the world has ceased. It has died. They call it the end of history, the end of creativity. The minds of all our fellow men and women, our brothers and sisters on this planet, are moment by moment filled with the most ridiculous nonsense, all sorts of ideas, left and right and up and down, until there is total submission, as we saw during the pandemic. Any kind of resistance against the perpetual bombardment from all sides, and the willing going along with it from people such as the Queen of England, no less, and Pope, and all these famous people who are in reality zero inside. It surrounds us, a matrix of insanity. Now, I saw a film from the 60s on the weekend. The father sat at a quiet table with his family. He brought out the Bible and read a few passages to his family, to his children. And in those days, that was normal, and people spoke words from the Bible to each other. They went again and again to that wisdom, which is the channel of light for the West and has been for 2,000 years. Now, other other worlds, other cultures have their own channel, but that was the Western channel. And I'm afraid it is badly broken. And people are spiraling, octave by octave downwards. I would be very careful if I were you. We cannot change what the world has become, but we can learn and restore, at least for ourselves, a channel of light, and choose very carefully who we allow inside our minds and inside our hearts and inside our breathing. And for everything else, a veil. We must conceal our light inside a society that cares not for it. And I disagree with Gurdjieff on this point, that both the journalists and the readers are the same, really. They are on one side sadists, on the other side masochists, on the one side speakers, on the other side listeners, but together they cooperate to perform this anti-reality, anti-truth theatre that they love so much. They have become deeply afraid of the truth and have become mired in a web. One can feel sorry for them, deeply sorry for the sickness of this world, for a world that has become a lie so all-encompassing that one dare not open one's eyes for fear of what one sees. But then the sun rises, and there was nothing to fear.